An unexpected item tells the story of one future president who exhibits all these traits in the face of impossible odds. We find it in Boston, Massachusetts. A shard of coconut fiber, engraved with an important message, is an everyday object that becomes a lifesaver and an image maker. But how can a fruit be so important that it means the difference between life and death? To find out, we head to the South Pacific in 1943, when World War II is going full bore, as the US and Japan battle for control. Hours before dawn, on August 2nd, a Japanese destroyer rams into an American PT boat and rips it in half.
These were small, they were about 78 feet long, they were wooden boats, they were fast, but they had very little armor on them.
2 crew members are killed. The survivors cling for life to the floating debris. Among them is their commander, a 22-year-old John Kennedy.
It was such a horrendous attack that all of the other boats that were with JFK, they didn't even check for survivors. They just took off.
All seems lost for Kennedy and his crew, but the young lieutenant remains calm and begins to put a daring rescue plan into motion.
Kennedy is the one who sort of takes a leadership role. He gets the men's attention, sort of puts a damper on the panic that ensues when the first damage occurs.
Kennedy leads his men in a 3-hour swim to the closest island, including a badly injured crewmate, who he tows by clenching the man's life jacket strap between his teeth.
Not only is he swimming in the choppy Pacific Ocean, dragging a guy with his teeth. I don't know if Michael Phelps can drag a guy with his teeth, but we're talking about some of the most dangerous shark-infested waters in the world.
Once on land, the crew is marooned.
They don't have water, they don't have food, and there was really no hope of rescue. So what Kennedy would do, night after night, is he would swim out in the middle of the night in shark-infested waters, out into the shipping channel, in hopes that he could see an Allied boat and flag it down with a flashlight. And of course, there are also Japanese boats going out there. That took guts.
Kennedy swims out every night for 4 nights with no sign of rescue, until he finally encounters some local islanders. And that's where the coconut comes in.
Kennedy takes a coconut and he carves a message in this coconut. He says, 11 alive, native knows position and reef. And then he signs his name, Kennedy.
Kennedy gives the coconut to the islanders and instructs them to take it to the PT base on an island 38 miles away. Their rescue comes 2 days later. He's awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, and the PT-109 story becomes a powerful weapon in his political arsenal.
It catapulted him into the eyes of the American people and really helped out with his campaign. To the Senate and eventually the White House.
Why don't you tell us about that coconut on your desk? Well, our PT boat was sunk by a Japanese destroyer, and we found a native and gave him a coconut and wrote a message on it, and I kept it as a memento.
When John F. Kennedy ran for president, the PT-109 incident defined in the public mind who Kennedy was. It created an aura about him that this was a man that we could trust with our country.
The 1960 election is one of the closest elections in American history. Truly, anything could have changed that election. And if it wasn't for the PT-109 incident, I don't think JFK wins that race. I think it's President Nixon in 1960. And if you can imagine how different history would be, Vietnam, the Bay of Pigs, Cuba.
In many ways, if not for a coconut, there may not have been Camelot.
You'll learn all about Camelot and all those things they're talking about. It is kind of an interesting story. They don't have quite all the whole story, but it is a good story. But Kennedy did gain a lot from that, kids, I'll tell you. And I'll give you some examples. This might be the best example. When John Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he gave, presidents when they run, they give out, little gifts and such and promotions for their presidency. And Kennedy used the PT-109 boat as a tie tack. And he had many, many made, and there's a story behind these two, many, many made that they gave to different people, okay, during the campaign. This one is one that says Kennedy 60, which signifies the 1960 election. This is what he gave out. Well, he planned on running for re-election in '64. Obviously, that didn't happen. And so they had these pins made for the '64 election, but they didn't put a date on. And Robert Kennedy actually used them when he ran for president in 1968 before he was assassinated also. So these are fairly rare. There's kind of an interesting story about these, I'll tell you. They're hard to find the good ones. And you can find different ones in different conditions, but they're really hard to find the good ones. So I bought these on eBay many, many, many years ago. And I also bought a glass, just a glass that had a Kennedy like this. Matter of fact, this is the glass right here. See this one right here? Just a glass that has some things on it. And so I bought it from this person. And so I'm waiting. I'm really excited about getting these because I paid quite a bit of money for them. And I get them. And I open them up, and all I get is this glass. It's filled full of paper and all wrapped. And so I'm kind of disappointed. Can't figure out where it is, And so I take it, unwrap it, put the glass on my shelf, which is worth about $3. And these are worth a lot more. And finally, I emailed the lady and I say, well, I got the glass, but I didn't get the tie tacks. Oh, well, I had them wrapped up inside the glass to protect the glass, part of the wrapping. Well, who would think of that? So I'm dumpster diving in the back of the dumpster at Robert's school, because it was the day afterwards. So I'm glad they didn't come with the garbage trucks. I'm in the back of the dumpster. Well, I don't know if you know who Carrie Pruitt is, but she teaches over at Southside. But Carrie was teaching for me at Roberts. I was a superintendent teacher. And all of a sudden, her kids are all at the door, and they open up the window from the dumpster. Mr. Durr, what are you doing out in the dumpster? Anyway, I actually found the sack that my garbage was in and dug these out and found them. I was scared to death. But this gives you an idea of the importance of what the PT-109 pin did. Now, G.I. Joes make all kinds of G.I. Joes, and we'll talk about them. They started in the 60s. But they even made a commemorative John F. Kennedy PT-109 Commander G.I. Joe. And this is, again, it tells the story on the back. They did a lot of these types of things. There's Vietnam Wall ones, there's space. But this is one, even has the coconut, a replica of JFK's. Yeah, and all this stuff. So don't open it because it's worth much more. It's worth much more never opened. Okay.
This is really cool.
Yeah.
You were Kennedy. Ask you for that coconut on the desk, and you just like, oh, that's
yeah. Well, here's another thing. Hero of PT-109. You see a lot of plates like this that are made, but this is just a picture commemorating. So he got a lot of mileage out of this, and that's what, you're not touching this, but anyway, he got a lot of mileage out of that. But it really did help him, like he said, for notoriety. And does the coconut make a difference in his election? Might. Does a phone call make a difference in your election? Who knows? There's little things that happen, so we kind of go from there. All right, now, here is something that came out that was kind of interesting. And this came out in 2002. They found JFK's PT-109 boat, found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. So, a little handout here. We'll spend a little bit of time on this. So we'll kind of read through this. And again, this was 2002, so several years later. It says, World War II patrol boat commanded by John F. Kennedy has been found in the Pacific Ocean off the Solomon Islands, local radio reported Wednesday. Renowned undersea explorer Robert Ballard told Solomon Islands Broadcasting Corps he located the remains of the 80-foot-long wooden boat PT-109 last week on the seabed in the Blanket Strait near Gizzo in New Georgia group of islands after searching for about a week. Gizzo is 235 miles northwest of the capital of the Solomon Islands. There are no immediate independent confirmation of the finding. Ballard, who has traced the wreck of the Titanic and other historic ships, did not provide further details of the discovery, citing contractual obligations over film and magazine rights to the search. Kennedy was a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy serving in the Pacific when his PT-109 was sliced in two by a Japanese destroyer in August of 1943. Kennedy and the survivors from his crew spent several hours in the water and the man who went on to become U.S. President told one injured survivor, engineer Patrick Henry McMahon, by swimming with a strap from McMahon's life jacket in his teeth to a nearby island. Kennedy reportedly carved a message on a coconut and sent it through a local coast watcher to his superiors, who organized the crew's rescue despite the presence of Japanese troops and boats. The account of Kennedy's wartime heroics as the skipper of the ill-fated torpedo boat, the Pacific, scene of some of the most fierce fighting during World War II, helped him become a popular politician. It is unknown how much of the submerged PT-109 wreck remains besides the 12-cylinder gasoline engines. Water is expected to have caused extensive damage to the hull, thought to be made of mahogany. Plywood was used for the internal structures, chart houses, and gun turrets. The boats were used primarily to attack surface ships, but they were also used to lay mines and smoke screens, to rescue downed aviators, and to carry out intelligence operations. Ballard had planned to use remote cameras to search for the boat. In a 1999 interview, he said PT-109 is not lost, just misplaced, but it's like looking for a coffin from an airplane in a zone where they've dumped a lot of unexploded ordnance. It's no fun. The late president's brother, Senator Edward M. Kennedy, and daughter Caroline Kennedy agreed to the expedition after being assured that the site where two true crew members died would not be disturbed. Ballard has previously mapped wrecks of other boats sunk during the battle for Guadalcanal and Solomons. He found wreckage of the Titanic in 1985. The luxury liner hit the iceberg and sank on the maiden voyage from Britain to the United States in 1912 with a loss of 1,522 lives. So did you get that? They had to have permission of the Kennedy family to even search for it. So the question you might ask is, did they bring it to the surface? No, they found it because the Kennedy family did not want it disturbed with those two people that lost their lives. Now, if you look at the back page, how about this? The Solomon Islander who saved John Kennedy. On August, he died in 2014. On August 2nd, 1943, a Japanese destroyer rammed a U.S. torpedo boat patrolling the strait in the Solomon Islands. A fireball lit up the night sky, and the Navy recorded Lieutenant John F. Kennedy and his 12-man crew as dead. But Kennedy and the 10 others had survived the crash, and they swam for hours with the young lieutenant towing a mate by gripping the man's life jacket strap in his teeth before reaching dry land. Yet those heroics would have gone for naught without Aroni, Kamana, and Bayaku Gaza, two Solomon Islanders who found the crew 3 days later subsisting on coconuts on a small island. The pair took an SOS message from Kennedy, which he scratched into a green coconut, and paddled their dugout canoe nearly 40 miles through hostile Japanese territory to an Allied base. The crew and the future president were rescued on August 8th. Born in the Solomon Islands, then a British protectorate, Kamana was, quote, never knew precisely how old he was, said the Boston Globe. He was a teenager when he started working as a scout for the Allies during World War II, tracking Japanese movements around the South Pacific. It was a dangerous job. Locals who collaborated with the Allies risked torture and death, and Japanese patrols often used the native canoes as target practice, said the Times. Kennedy never forgot the risk taken by Kamona and Goss to save his crew. He kept the engraved coconut on his White House desk and even invited the two men to his inauguration. We'll talk about that. But they were reportedly prevented from attending by colonial officials, embarrassed by their homely appearance. Isn't that terrible? Kumana had hoped to see Kennedy again and was devastated to learn of his assassination in 1963, said the Washington Post. My sadness was great, he said. In 2002, Kumuna was visited by the president's nephew, Max, and burst into tears when he was presented with a bust of Kennedy that became his most treasured possession. Max and Kamuma's son translated their conversation and told him his name was John Fitzgerald Kennedy Kamuna. How about that? So a great story. Keep guy to live for a long time. All right. We'll move on a little bit here now and talk a little bit more about the Kennedy profile. So his military career is ended. And so what does he do after his military career is ended? Anybody want to take a shot on that?
Finds a girl.
Well, he already found a girl, man. Well, no, he didn't, by the way. Anyway, what did he do? He went into politics. Now, this is an interesting story because really, it was the fate of his older brother, Joe Jr., that set the stage for JFK to go into politics after the war. Because Joseph Kennedy Jr. was really the apple of his father's eye. And Joseph Kennedy actually had visions of his oldest son, who remember died in World War II, becoming president of the United States. That was the old man's goal. Well, after the war, John Kennedy entered politics in Massachusetts because he believed it was his responsibility to fulfill the political shoes of his older brother. So he really was not that interested in politics after the war, but because his father was so intense on having one of the Kennedy boys someday be president of the United States, and Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. was killed in World War II, John Kennedy felt his responsibility to step up to the plate, so to speak. Now, this is what he actually later publicly said about going into politics. You don't have to write this down, but listen. This is what he said about going into politics. He said, quote, "It was like being drafted. My father wanted his eldest son in politics. Wanted isn't the right word. He demanded it. You know my father." So it was his responsibility to fill that void. So he did run, and he was elected in 1946 to the House of Representatives from Massachusetts. Okay? So in 1946, he was elected to the House of Representatives from the state of Massachusetts. And it was during this time that he served in the House of Representatives is when he met the pretty young lady by the name of Jacqueline Bouvier at a dinner party in Washington. That's when he met her. Well, Jackie, as she was better known to her friends, had some money also, because she was married to a very wealthy Wall Street broker. She was not married, she was the daughter of a very wealthy Wall Street broker by the name of John V. Bouvier III. So when Jackie met John Kennedy, it was two wealthy families meeting, because Jackie's father was a very wealthy Wall Street broker whose name was John V. Bouvier III. So they start dating while he's in the house. So what does Kennedy do in 1952? Runs for the Senate. Very good. Guess who he defeats to become Senator of Massachusetts? What? No. Think of this name. Pekian. He defeats Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. in 1952 to become Senator of Massachusetts, who he later defeats for the presidency when he runs for the vice presidency with Richard Nixon. So he actually defeated Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. twice in his political career. And the first was in November of 1952 when he defeated Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. to become Senator of Massachusetts. So he served his term in the House, then he was elected to the Senate in 1952. Well, as we mentioned before, in 1953 is when John and Jackie were married, and this is when his political career really began to blossom, is after he was attached to Jackie. She was a very good supporter and a good person to have around. And they actually had 4 children. How many of you ever heard of? 2, so there's a story behind that. So John and Jackie Kennedy actually had 4 children. Their first child was born in August of 1956. Unfortunately, it was a female, a daughter that was stillborn. So they lost their first child in August of 1956 with a stillborn daughter. So in August of 56, Jackie gave birth to a stillborn daughter. Then Caroline, C-A-R-O-L-I-N-E, Caroline, C-A-R-O-L-I-N-E. She was born on November, these are important dates to kind of keep in mind. She was born on November 27th of 1957. November 27th of 1957. Then came John F. Kennedy Jr. John, or John Jr. Most affectionately called John. And he was born, think about the date, on November 25th of 1960. November 25th of 1960. So stillborn daughter, August of 56. Caroline was born on November 27th, 1957. John Jr. was born on November 25th, 1960. And Patrick Kennedy was born on August 7th, 1963. August 7th, 1963. Unfortunately, he was born very premature and he died 2 days later on August 9th. So Patrick Kennedy was born on August 7th, 1963. He was born very premature and died 2 days later on August 9th. And we'll tell you more about that later also. Question? What is the significance of the date that Caroline and John Jr. were born on? What's that? No.
Junior was born right before he was elected, right? Or right after?
Well, close. He was very good, Blaine. He was assassinated on November 22nd. Matter of fact, he was buried on November 25th on John's birthday. And Mrs. Kennedy even held a birthday party because she felt it was important. 2 days later, after his birthday party, they have another one for Caroline, just days after their father is assassinated. Kind of a tragic thing. We'll talk more about that as well. Well, JFK's political career really came to an abrupt halt in 1954. He kept experiencing this incredibly severe back pain from his growing up and especially from this accident in PT 109. Okay, so he went under the knife for back surgery, which in 1954 was a lot different than what it is today. Okay? And it took him almost 2 years to recover. So he recovered in both 1955 and 1956. He was pretty bedridden for quite a period of time. Very severe back surgery. What did he do during his time? What did he do to waste his time? He wrote a book called Profiles